George Washington, February 22, 1732 and December 14, 1799, was the dominant military and political leader of the new United States of America from 1775 to 1799. He led the American victory over Britain in the American Revolutionary War, as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army in 1775 and 1783, and he presided over the writing of the Constitution in 1787. As the unanimous choice to serve as the first President of the United States, 1789 and 1797, he developed the forms and rituals of government that have been used ever since, such as using a cabinet system and delivering an inaugural address. As president, he built a strong, well-financed national government that stayed neutral in the wars raging in Europe, suppressed rebellion and won acceptance among Americans of all types, but also saw the advent of contentious political parties. Washington was universally regarded as the father of his country. In colonial Virginia, Washington was born into the provincial gentry in a wealthy, well-connected family that owned tobacco plantations using slave labor. He was homeschooled by his father and older brother, but both died young, and he became attached to the powerful Fairfax clan, who promoted his career as a surveyor and soldier. Strong, brave, eager for combat, and a natural leader, young Washington quickly became a senior officer of the colonial forces, 1754 and 58, during the first stages of the French and Indian War. Indeed, his rash actions helped precipitate the war. Washington's experience, his military bearing, his leadership of the Patriot cause in Virginia, and his political base in the largest colony made him the obvious choice of the Second Continental Congress in 1775, as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army to fight the British in the American Revolution. He forced the British out of Boston in 1776, but was defeated and nearly captured later that year, when he lost New York City. After crossing the Delaware River in the dead of winter, he defeated the enemy in 2 battles, retook New Jersey, and restored momentum to the Patriot cause. Because of his strategy, revolutionary forces captured 2 major British armies at Saratoga in 1777 and Yorktown in 1781. Negotiating with Congress, governors, and French allies, he held together a tenuous army and a fragile nation amid the threats of disintegration and invasion. Historians give the Commander-in-Chief high marks for his selection and supervision of his generals, his encouragement of morale, his coordination with the state governors and state militia units, his relations with Congress, and his attention to supplies, logistics, and training. In battle, however, Washington was repeatedly outmaneuvered by British generals with larger armies. Washington is given full credit for the strategies that forced the British evacuation of Boston in 1776 and the surrender of Yorktown in 1781. After victory had been finalized in 1783, Washington resigned rather than seize power, and returned to his plantation at Mount Vernon, proving his opposition to dictatorship and his commitment to republican government. Washington presided over the Constitutional Convention that drafted the United States Constitution in 1787 because of his dissatisfaction with the weaknesses of Articles of Confederation that had time and again impeded the war effort. Washington became the first president of the United States in 1789. He attempted to bring rival factions together to unify the nation. He supported Alexander Hamilton's programs to pay off all state and national debt, implement an effective tax system, and create a national bank, despite opposition from Thomas Jefferson. Washington proclaimed the U.S. neutral in the wars raging in Europe after 1793. He avoided war with Britain and guaranteed a decade of peace and profitable trade by securing the Jay Treaty in 1795, despite intense opposition from the Jeffersonians. Although never officially joining the Federalist Party, he supported its programs. Washington's farewell address was an influential primer in Republican virtue and a stern warning against partisanship, sectionalism, and involvement in foreign wars. Washington had a vision of a great and powerful nation that would be built on Republican lines using federal power. He sought to use the national government to improve the infrastructure, open the western lands, create a national university, promote commerce, found a capital city later named Washington, D.C., reduce regional tensions and promote a spirit of nationalism. The name of American, he said, must override any local attachments. Left square bracket 1 right square bracket. At his death, Washington was hailed as first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. Left square bracket to right square bracket. The Federalists made him the symbol of their party, but for many years, the Jeffersonians continued to distrust his influence and delayed building the Washington Monument. As the leader of the first successful revolution against a colonial empire in world history, Washington became an international icon for liberation and nationalism. His symbolism especially resonated in France and Latin America. Left square bracket 3 right square bracket. Historical scholars consistently rank him as one of the 2 or 3 greatest presidents. John Adams, October 30th, 1735 and July 4th, 1826, was an American statesman, diplomat and political theorist. A leading champion of independence in 1776, he was the second President of the United States, 1797 and 1801. Hailing from New England, Adams, a prominent lawyer and public figure in Boston, was highly educated and represented Enlightenment values promoting republicanism. A conservative Federalist, he was one of the most influential founding fathers of the United States. Adams came to prominence in the early stages of the American Revolution. As a delegate from Massachusetts to the Continental Congress, he played a leading role in persuading Congress to declare independence, and assisted Thomas Jefferson in drafting the United States Declaration of Independence in 1776. As a representative of Congress in Europe, he was a major negotiator of the eventual peace treaty with Great Britain, and chiefly responsible for obtaining important loans from Amsterdam bankers. A political theorist and historian, Adams largely wrote the Massachusetts State Constitution in 1780, but was in Europe when the Federal Constitution was drafted in similar principles later in the decade. One of his greatest roles was, as a judge of character. In 1775, he nominated George Washington to be Commander-in-Chief, and 25 years later nominated John Marshall to be Chief Justice of the United States. Adams' revolutionary credentials secured him to terms as George Washington's vice president and his own election in 1796 as the second president. During his one term, he encountered ferocious attacks by the Jeffersonian Republicans, as well as the dominant faction in his own Federalist Party led by his bitter enemy Alexander Hamilton. Adams signed the controversial Alien and Sedition Acts, and built up the Army and Navy especially in the face of an undeclared naval war, called the Quasi-War, with France, 1798 to 1800. The major accomplishment of his presidency was his peaceful resolution of the conflict in the face of Hamilton's opposition. In 1800, Adams was defeated for re-election by Thomas Jefferson and retired to Massachusetts. He later resumed his friendship with Jefferson. He and his wife, Abigail Adams, founded an accomplished family line of politicians, diplomats, and historians now referred to as the Adams political family. Adams was the father of John Quincy Adams, the sixth President of the United States. His achievements have received greater recognition in modern times, though his contributions were not initially as celebrated as those of other founders. Thomas Jefferson, April 14, 1743 and July 4, 1826, left square bracket 1 right square bracket was the third President of the United States, 1801 and 1809, and the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, 1776. An influential founding father, Jefferson envisioned America as a great empire of liberty that would promote republicanism. Left square bracket to right square bracket. Jefferson served as the wartime governor of Virginia, 1779 and 1781, barely escaping capture by the British in 1781. Left square bracket 3 right square bracket. Many people disliked his tenure, and he did not win office again in Virginia. Left square bracket 4 right square bracket from mid-1784. Left square bracket 5 right square bracket through late 1789. Left square bracket 6 right square bracket. Jefferson lived outside the United States. He served in Paris initially as a commissioner to help negotiate commercial treaties. In May 1785 he succeeded Benjamin Franklin as the U.S. Minister to France. Left square bracket 7 right square bracket. He was the first United States Secretary of State, 1789 and 1793, under George Washington and advised him against a national bank and the Jay Treaty. He was the second Vice President, 1797 and 1801, under John Adams. Winning on an anti-federalist platform, Jefferson took the oath of office and became President of the United States in 1801. As president, he negotiated the Louisiana Purchase, 1803, and sent the Lewis and Clark Expedition, 1804 and 1806, to explore the vast new territory and lands further west. Left square bracket 8 right square bracket. Jefferson sponsored embargo laws that escalated tensions with Britain and France, leading to war with Britain in 1812. Shortly after he left office, he idealized the independent yeoman farmer as exemplar of Republican virtues, distrusted cities and financiers, and favored states' rights and a limited federal government. Jefferson supported the separation of church and state. Left square bracket 9 right square bracket and was the author of the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, 1779-1786. Jefferson's revolutionary view in individual religious freedom and protection from government authority have generated much interest with modern scholars. Left square bracket 10 right square bracket. He was the epitome of Jeffersonian democracy and the co-founder and leader of the Democratic Republican Party, which dominated American politics for 25 years. Born into a prominent planter family, Jefferson owned hundreds of slaves throughout his life. He held views on the racial inferiority of Africans common for this period in time. Left square bracket 11, right square bracket. While historians long discounted accounts that Jefferson had an intimate relationship with his slave Sally Hemings, it is now widely held that he did and had 6 children by her. James Madison, Jr., March 16, 1751 and June 28, 1836, was an American politician and political philosopher who served as the 4th President of the United States, 1809 and 1817, and is considered one of the founding fathers of the United States. He was the principal author of the United States Constitution, and is often called the father of the Constitution. In 1788, he wrote over a third of the Federalist Papers, the most influential commentary in the Constitution. The first president to have served in the United States Congress, he was a leader in the first United States Congress, drafting many basic laws, and was responsible for the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and thus is also known as the father of the Bill of Rights. Left square bracket 1 right square bracket. As a political theorist, Madison's most distinctive belief was that the new republic needed checks and balances to protect individual rights from the tyranny of the majority. Left square bracket 2 right square bracket left square bracket 3 right square bracket left square bracket 4 right square bracket left square bracket 5 right square bracket. As leader in the House of Representatives, Madison worked closely with President George Washington to organize the new federal government. Breaking with Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton in 1791, Madison and Thomas Jefferson organized what they called the Republican Party, later called the Democratic Republican Party, left square bracket 6 right square bracket, in opposition to key policies of the Federalists, especially the National Bank and the Jay Treaty. He secretly co-authored, along with Thomas Jefferson, the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions in 1798 to protest the Alien and Sedition Acts. As Jefferson's Secretary of State, 1801 and 1809, Madison supervised the Louisiana Purchase, doubling the nation's size, and sponsored the ill-fated Embargo Act of 1807. As president, he led the poorly prepared nation into the War of 1812 against Great Britain. A series of disasters at the beginning of the war damaged his reputation, but by 1814 and 15 American forces repulsed major British invasions, the Federalist opposition fell into disarray, and Americans felt triumphant at the end of the war despite its ending in stalemate for both sides. During and after the war, Madison reversed many of his positions. By 1815, he supported the creation of the Second National Bank, a strong military, and a high tariff to protect the new factories opened during the war. James Monroe, April 28, 1758 and July 4, 1831, was the 5th President of the United States, 1817 and 1825. Monroe was the last president who was a founding father of the United States, and the last president from the Virginia dynasty and the Republican generation. Left square bracket 1 right square bracket. His presidency was marked both by an era of good feelings and a period of relatively little partisan strife and later by the Panic of 1819 and a fierce national debate over the admission of the Missouri Territory. Monroe is most noted for his proclamation of the Monroe Doctrine in 1823, which stated that the United States would not tolerate further European intervention in the Americas. Born in Westmoreland County, Virginia, Monroe fought in the American Revolutionary War. After studying law under Thomas Jefferson from 1780 to 1783, he served in the Continental Congress. As an anti-Federalist delegate to the Virginia Convention that considered ratification of the United States Constitution, Monroe opposed ratification, claiming it gave too much power to the central government. Nonetheless, Monroe took an active part in the new government, and in 1790 he was elected to the Senate, where he joined the Jeffersonians. He gained experience as an executive, as the governor of Virginia, and rose to national prominence when, as a diplomat in France, he helped negotiate the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. During the War of 1812, Monroe held the critical roles of Secretary of State and the Secretary of War under President James Madison. Facing little opposition from the fractured Federalist Party, Monroe was easily elected president in 1816, winning over 80% of the electoral vote. As president, he sought to ease partisan tensions and embarked on a tour of the country. He was well received everywhere. As nationalism surged, partisan fury subsided, and the era of good feelings ensued. The Panic of 1819 struck, and dispute over the admission of Missouri embroiled the country in 1820. Nonetheless, Monroe won near unanimous re-election. In 1823, he announced the Monroe Doctrine, which became a landmark in American foreign policy. Following his retirement in 1825, Monroe was plagued by financial difficulties. He died in New York City on July 4, 1831.